This is a Trident Disabilities audio archive recording. The title of the essay I'll be reading today is called Mermaids and Tritons in the Age of Reason by Von Scribner. Published September 29th, 2021. Read by Arlo Angeles. For much of the 18th century, Western intellectuals chased after tritons and mermaids. Von Scribner follows the hunt, revealing how humanity's supposed aquatic ancestors became wondrous screens on which to project theories of geographical, racial, and taxonomical difference. The essay then shows you a picture of a hand-colored engraving from 1817 by John Paz. This hand-colored engraving has 4 mermaids on the cover. On May 6, 1736, the polymath Benjamin Franklin informed readers of his Pennsylvania Gazette of a sea monster recently spotted in Bermuda, the upper part of whose body was in the shape and about the bigness of a boy of 12 years old. With long black hair, the lower part resembled a fish. Apparently, the creature's human likeness inspired his captors to let it live. A 1769 issue of the Providence Gazette similarly reported that crew members of an English ship off the coast of Brest, France, watched as a sea monster like a man circled their ship, at one point viewing for some time the figure that was in our prow, which represented a beautiful woman. The captain, the pilot, and the whole crew, consisting of 32 men, verified this tale. The above examples are quite representative of what an early modern Britain would have found in the newspapers. That these interactions were even reported tells us much. Intelligent men like Benjamin Franklin considered such encounters legitimate enough to spend time and money to print in their widely read newspapers. By doing so, printers and authors help sustain a narrative of curiosity surrounding these wondrous creatures. As a Londoner sat down with his paper, perhaps in the aptly named Mermaid Tavern, and read of yet another instance of a mermaid or triton sighting, his doubt might have transformed into curiosity. Philosophers' debate over mermaids and tritons in this period reveal their willingness to embrace wonder in their larger quest to understand the origins of humankind. Naturalists use a wide range of methodologies to critically study these odd hybrids, and in turn assert the reality of merpeople as evidence of humanity's aquatic roots. As with other creatures they encountered in their global travels, European philosophers utilized various theories, including those of racial, biological, taxonomical, and geographic difference, to understand merpeople's and, by proxy, humans' place in the natural world. The article then shows you a picture of a curious and surprising nymph taken in the year 1784 in the Gulf of Stancio. This picture reads, "By the King's royal authority, whereas many have imagined that the history of mermaids." This picture also shows a mermaid sticking its head out of the water. Western's combination of curiosity and imperial expansion is well reflected in the cultural relevance of merpeople. Wealthy individuals and philosophical societies funded naturalists, botanists, and cartographers' expeditions to the New World in the hope that they might broaden humanity's understanding of the world and their place in it. In an expanding number of investigations into mermaids and tritons, naturalists demonstrated a growing penchant for the wondrous. They also importantly revealed how the process of scientific research had drastically changed over the last 200 years. Rather than relying strictly on ancient text and hearsay, 18th century naturalists mustered various modern resources: global correspondent networks, erudite publication opportunities, transatlantic travel, specimen procedures, and learned societies to rationally examine what many considered fantastical. Thus, a growing body of gentlemen both carried on and eschewed the supposed narrative of enlightened logic by applying well-known valid research methods to mysterious merpeople. In doing so, 18th century philosophers such as Cotton Mather, Peter Collinson, Samuel Fowlers, Carl Linus, and Hans Sloane complicated our and their contemporaries' conceptions of science, nature, and humanity. The smartest men in the Western world, in short, spent much of the 18th century chasing merpeople around the globe. The Royal Society of London proved key in this endeavor, acting as both a repository and producer of legitimate scientific investigation. Sir Robert Sibbald, a respected Scottish physician and geographer, well understood the Society's desire for groundbreaking research. On November 29, 1703, he wrote to Sir Hans Sloane, the president of the Society, to inform the London gentlemen that Sibbald and his colleagues had been recording an account of Scotland's amphibious creatures, along with accompanying copper plate images, which he hoped to dedicate to the Royal Society. Realizing the Society's interest in the most up-to-date studies, Sibbald told Sloane that he had added several accounts and the figures of some amphibious aquatic animals and of some mixed kinds, as the mermaids or sirens seen sometimes in our seas. Here were two leading thinkers of the 18th century exchanging erudite missives on merpeople. The article then shows you an illustration of Pesce Donna from Giovanni Antonio Cavasi's historic description of three kingdoms, Congo, Mataba, and Anagola. On July 5th, 1716, Cotton Mather also penned a letter to the Royal Society of London. This was not odd, as the botan naturalist often detailed his scientific findings. Yet this letter's subject was somewhat curious, titled A Triton. This missive demonstrated Mather's sincere belief in the existence of merpeople. The Royal Society of London fellow began by explaining that until recently he considered merpeople no more real than centaurs or sphinx. Mather found myriad historical accounts of merpeople, ranging from the ancient Greek Demostratus, who witnessed a Triton at town of Tanagra, to Pliny the Elder's assertions of mermaids and tritons' existence. Yet, because Plinisms are of no great reputation in our days, Mather noted, he passed off much of these ancient accounts as false. Mather's suspicions of the existence of such creatures had got more strength given. However, when he read sundry accounts via well-respected European thinkers like Bostra and Bolognius, still, Mather was not totally convinced, at least until February 22nd, 1716, when three honest and credible men, coming in a boat from Milford to Brainford, Connecticut, encountered a Triton. Having heard this news at first hand, Mather could only exclaim, "Now at last my credulity is entirely conquered, and I am compelled now to believe the existence of a Triton." As this creature fled the men, they had a full view of him and saw his head, and face, and necks, and shoulders, and arms, and elbows, and breast, and back, all of human shape. the lower parts were those of a fish and colored like a mackerel. Though this Triton escaped, it convinced Mather of Mer people's existence, maintaining that his story was not false. Mather promised the Royal Society that he would continue to relay all new occurrences of nature. The article then shows you an illustration for the Martinique Triton for the Universal Magazine of Knowledge and Pleasure. This illustration has a merman on the cover. The famous naturalist Carl Linus also threw himself into investigating mermaids and tritons. Having read newspaper articles detailing mermaid sighting in Nyköping, Sweden, Linus sent a letter to the Swedish Academy of Science in 1749, urging a hunt in which to catch this animal alive or preserved in spirits. Linus admitted science does not have a certain answer if the existence of mermaids is a fact or is a fable or imagination of some ocean fish. Yet in his mind the reward outweighed the risk, as the discovery of such a rare phenomenon could result in one of the biggest discoveries that the Academy could possibly achieve, and for which the whole world should thank the Academy. Perhaps these creatures could reveal humankind's origins. For Linus, world-renowned for his contributions to taxonomical classification, this ancient mystery must be solved. The Dutch artist Samuel Fowlers also claimed to have discovered mer people in a distant land, and in doing so set off a decades-long debate that spanned continents and media types. Fowlers lived in Ambon, Indonesia, from 1706 to 1712, while serving as a clergy's assistant for the Dutch East India Company. During Fowler's tenure on a spice island, he drew various representations of native flora and fauna. One image happened to depict a mermaid or siren. Fowler's siren closely resembled the classic depiction of a mermaid, with long sea green hair, a peasant face, and a bare midsection that turned into a blue/green tail at the waist. This mermaid's skin, however, was dark with a slight greenish tinge, implying a similarity with the local indigenous population. In the notes that accompanied Fowler's original drawing, the Dutch artist contended that he had this siren alive for 4 days in my house at Ambon in a tub of water. Fowler's son had brought it to him from the nearby island of Baru, where he purchased it from the blacks for 2 ells of cloth. Eventually, the whimpering creatures died of hunger, not wishing to take any nourishment, neither fishes nor shellfishes nor mosses or grasses. After the mermaid's death, Fowlers had the curiosity to lift its fin in the front and in the back, and found it was shaped like a woman. Fowlers claimed that the specimen was subsequently relayed to Holland and lost. The story of this Ambon siren, however, had only just begun. The article then shows you the drawings that Fowler made of the mermaids. They have a very long tail, and he also depicted another sea creature that looks a lot like a lobster, but pink. Years before, Louis Renard, a French-born book dealer living in Amsterdam, even published a version of Fowler's siren in his own Poisons, 1719. Fowler's images had already enjoyed wide distribution, yet because of the unusually bright colors and fantastic creatures represented in Fowler's drawings, many doubted the accuracy and veracity. Renard was especially worried about the validity of Fowler's siren, exclaiming, "I am even afraid of the monster represented under the name of mermaid. Needs to be rectified." Philosophers found both promise and disgust in Fowler's painting, and the subsequent dialogue that Renard initiated with his letters. In his preface to the 1754 version of Renard's Poisons, the Dutch collector and director of the Menageries and Natures and Art Cabinets des Stadhouders Arnold Vorsmar called objections to merpeople's reality weak, and contended that this monster, if we must call it by this name, although I do not see the reason for it, was simply able to avoid humans' traps better than any other creature because of its hybrid nature, and thus rarely seen, because of merpeople's biological similarity to humans. Furthermore, Voshmar argued that they were more subject to decay after death than the body of other fishes, such as a lack of preservation not only diminished sightings, it also went towards explaining the lack of full specimens in cabinets of curiosities. By the mid-18th century, a growing number of physicians not only believed in the existence of merpeople, but also began to wonder what sort of ramifications such creatures might have for understanding humanity's origins and future. As G. Robinson noted in The Beauties of Nature and Art displayed in a tour through the world 1764, though the generality of natural historians regard mermen and mermaids as fabulous animals, as far as the testimony of many writers for the reality of such creatures may be, depended upon so much reason there appears for believing their existence. The Reverend Thomas Smith took Robinson's contention to an even more definitive note 4 years later, asserting that while there are many persons, indeed, who doubt the reality of mermen and mermaids, yet there seems to be this sufficient testimony to establish it beyond dispute. But the problem remained. Men like Robinson and Smith could rely upon ancient, often ridiculed sightings or tenuous hypotheses for their proof. They needed scientific research to back up their claims, and they got it. Two especially important articles, each approaching merpeople through unique scientific methodology, appeared in the Gentleman's Magazine between 1759 and 1775. The first piece, published in December 1759, accompanied a plate image of a siren or mermaid, said to have been shown in the fair of Saint Germain's, Paris, in 1758. The author noted that the siren was drawn from life by the celebrated Sieur Gautier. Jacques-Fabien Gautier, a French painter and member of the Dijon Academy, was widely recognized for his skill in printing accurate images of scientific subjects. Attaching Gautier's name to the print garnered immediate credibility, even for such a strange image. But even without Gautier's name attached to it, the print and its accompanying text were distinguished by their modern scientific methodology. Gautier had apparently interacted with the living creature, finding that it was about 2 feet long, alive and very active, sporting about in the vessel of water in which it was kept with great seeming delight and agility. The article then shows you a picture of Jacques-Fabien Gautier's illustration of the mermaid. It is a merman with a green tail and very big ears. Gautier consequently recorded that its positions when it was at rest was always erect. It was a female, and the features were hideously ugly, As displayed in detail by the accompanying print, Gautier found its skin harsh, the ears very large, and the back parts and tail were covered with scales. According to the image, this was not the mermaid that had long graced cathedrals through Europe, nor did it match the description relayed by so many other naturalists and discoverers through history, where most had been a striking female form distinguished by flowing blue and green hair. Gautier's mermaid was completely bald, with very large ears and hideously ugly features. Gautier's siren was also much smaller than traditional mermaids, at only 60 centimeters, 2 feet tall. More than anything, Gautier's mermaid reflected the mid-18th century approach to studying the wondrous aspects of nature. The Frenchman employed well-respected scientific techniques, in this case a close inspection of the creature's anatomy and an accurate accompanying drawing, much resembling those of other illustrated creatures at the time, to display as reality what many still considered fantasy. Scholars use the Gautier publication to reflect upon the legitimacy of merpeople. An anonymous contributor to the June 1762 issue of the Gentleman's Magazine exclaimed that Gautier's image seemed to establish the fact incontrovertibly that such monsters do exist in nature. But this author had further evidence. An April 1762 edition of the Mercury of France reported that in June the previous year, 2 girls playing on a beach on the island of Noirmoutier, just off the south coast of France, discovered in a kind of natural grotto an animal of a human form leaning on its hands. In a rather morbid turn of events, one of the girls stabbed the creature with a knife and watched as it groaned like a human person. Though the 2 girls then proceeded to cut off the poor creature's hands, which had fingers and nails quite formed, with webs between the fingers, and sought the aid of the island surgeon, who upon seeing the creature recorded, "It was as big as the largest man. Its skin was white, resembling that of a drowned person. It had the breast of a full-chested woman, a flat nose, a large mouth, the chin adorned with a kind of beard formed of fine shells, and over the whole body tufts of similar white shells. It had the tail of a fish, and at the extremity of it a kind of feet." Such a story, when verified by a trained and trusted surgeon, only further proved Gautier's research, for a growing number of 18th century Britons, merpeople existed, bore a striking resemblance to humans, and needed to be studied at length. In May 1775, the Gentleman's Magazine published an account of a mermaid taken in the Gulf of Stancio, in the archipelago or Aegean Sea, by a merchantman trading to Natalia in August 1774. Like Gautier's 1759 siren, this specimen was drawn and described in detail. Yet the author also distanced himself from Gautier, noting that his mermaid differs materially from that shown at the Fair of Saint-Germain some years ago. In an especially interesting turn of events, the author utilized a comparison of the 2 mermaids' prints to speculate on issues of race and biology, contending that there is reason to believe that there are 2 distinct genera,
or more properly, two species of the same genus, the one resembling the African blacks, the other the European whites. While Goethe's siren had in every respect the countenance of a Negro, the author found that his mermaid displayed the features and complexion of a European. Its face is like that of a young female, its eyes a fine light blue, its nose small and handsome, its mouth small, its lips thin. The article then shows us a miscellaneous plate featured in Gentleman's Magazine and Historic Chronicle. This picture has a European-looking mermaid on the cover and what looks to be a ring and a kind of seal. Early modern English writers leaned on two stereotypes to commodify and degenerate African female bodies, as the historian Jennifer L. Morgan has shown. First, they conventionally set the black female figure against one that was white, and thus beautiful. Here, the 1775 author follows perfectly in line, comparing Goethe's Negro and hideously ugly mermaid to his own beautiful mermaid with the features and complexion of a European. Secondly, early modern Europeans concentrated on African women's supposed sexually and reproductively bound savagery, in order to ultimately turn to black women as evidence of cultural inferiority that ultimately became encoded as racial difference. Not only were naturalists using the science of merpeople to gain a deeper understanding of the natural order of sea creatures, they were also utilizing their interpretations of these mysterious beings to reflect upon humans, especially white humans, placed in an ever-changing racial biological framework. Carl Linus and his student Abraham Oesterdam further complicated the narrative of classification and legitimacy. Though the Swedish Academy found nothing in their search for Linus's mermaid in 1749, Linus and Oesterdam took matters into their own hands, publishing a dissertation on the lizard siren in 1766, having detailed a long list of mermaid sightings throughout history in the initial pages of the dissertation. They next relayed myriad instances of marvelous animals and amphibians that closely resembled creatures of lore and consequently made classification tricky. Ultimately, they judged this mermaid like creature worthy of an animal, which should be shown to those who are curious because it is a new form. The father of classification had apparently discovered a worthy piece of the natural puzzle, and it linked humans, even if distantly, to animals of the sea. The lizard siren also, importantly, further blurred the lines of classification that Linus had so proudly developed, suggesting that perhaps human beings might find some distant relation to amphibian creatures. The article then shows us a picture of the lizard siren from Carl Linus. This mermaid looks a little scary. It kind of just looks like a fish with arms and feathers at its gills. 18th century philosophers' investigations of merpeople represented both endurance of wonder and the emergence of rational science during the Enlightenment period. once resting at the core of myth and on the very fringes of scientific research, now Mermaids and Tritons were steadily catching philosophers' attention. Initially, such research was relegated to newspaper articles, brief mentions in travelers' narratives, or hearsay, but by the second half of the 18th century, naturalists began to approach merpeople with modern scientific methodology, dissecting, preserving, and drawing these mysterious creatures with the utmost rigor. By the close of the 18th century, mermaids and tritons emerged as some of the most useful specimens for understanding humanity's marine origins. The possibility, or for some, reality, of merpeople's existence forced many philosophers to reconsider previous classification measures, racial parameters, and even evolutionary models. As more European thinkers believed, or at least entertained the possibility that such monsters do exist in nature, Enlightenment philosophers merged the wondrous and rational to understand the natural world and humanity's place in it.